Heidi ho, everybody. It's Michael Osinski.
And it's Tyler Esselman.
And you are listening to This One Goes to 11.
This One Goes to 11 is me and Michael's podcast where we invite friends of ours, family of ours, friends of friends, family of friends, family of community members, neighbors, you know, whoever, on to make their case for what they believe is a perfect album.
So perfect that 10 out of 10 just isn't good enough.
And it's the season 4 finale.
It is. We are at the season finale. Will there be a cliffhanger, Tyler? Are we going to leave them with a cliffhanger?
I don't know. Will we get the guy? Will we get the girl? Will we get the job? Will
we get the dog out of the well? Like, I don't know what.
We'll definitely get the dog out of the well.
I hope so. Yeah, don't leave the dog in the well.
Two strapping guys like us, we could do that.
Yeah. Well, how deep is the well?
I think there's probably a standard well depth. But that's a subject for another podcast. I have been looking forward to this episode for quite some time, Michael.
Me too.
And we're talking to a dear friend of mine from way back. Who are we talking to?
We are talking to Brian Czaicki, who is the Season 3 Trivia Contest winner!
And the Season 2 Trivia Contest runner-up. He came back. He did it.
Yeah.
Brian Czaicki is an old friend of mine. We've known each other for a long, long time. He is a senior software engineer at Block and has worked on software systems for over 7 years at various locations, including Microsoft. I'm adding this little part. He's one of the smartest people I've ever known in my life. A fan of anything outdoors, he enjoys snowboarding, backpacking in national parks, and even stints of mountaineering, including once climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. Come on, Michael. He lives in Bend, Oregon with his fiancée, Kelly. Hi, Kelly. Can't wait to meet you. And his dog, Finn. Hi, Finn. Also can't wait to meet you. He's just the best. This is one. He is one of the most talented, kindest, most intelligent guys I've ever known. And I'm really glad he's on the pod today.
He brought us a list of albums. It's like, I mean, okay, so let's establish that he is a mega fan of the podcast.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then he sent us a list of albums. It's like he knew our brains, or like he was trying to force our hand to talk about an album. Well, not force our hand. I guess he just knew who we were. It was impressive.
Yeah, it was. He came ready. He knew exactly what he wanted to say. He knew exactly what he wanted to ask us. He's just really cool, and I think you're all really going to enjoy this as your nice little piece of cake at the end of season 4.
And we do a few little different things with this episode because, I mean, we couldn't help ourselves. I mean, if you've seen the episode title, you know what's coming. And and if you've listened to at least 2 episodes of this podcast, you know how we feel about this album already. So we decided to mix things up a little bit. So expect some surprises as the episode progresses.
Too true. You're going to love it. Well, let's get to it, shall we?
Let's shall. Brian Czaicki, welcome to This One Goes to 11. How you doing?
I'm doing excellent. Very, very humbled to be here with this tribunal. Very excited to get it started today.
You approach it with the seriousness that few others do. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, that's like a trivia contest winner would. Like this.
Yes.
You guys, it's a serious podcast and there's no games, and I know that. So
very much, very serious. Yeah. Brian is making reference, dear listeners, to the fact that he is the winner of our social media trivia contest from season 3, and was pretty serious about it. I got to say, like, there was a lot of commentary in the DMs that, you know, you didn't use poor language, but we could sense the frustration sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, this is a podcast about winning.
You've said it.
You've been listening. It's clear you've been listening,
and you have a competitive spirit. I respect that
for sure.
And Brian was the runner-up actually for the season 2 trivia contest. So he is really serious about this.
He came back and did it. He came back. He learned. He retooled, and he came back and got that ring. Got your chip.
Yeah. I'm the Clayton Kershaw of this contest.
Hey, Evergreen, that guy.
Yeah.
One of the best of all time. Okay. We could go on like this forever, but let's we've been anticipating this day because, Brian, you have brought a truly special album before the tribunal today. Can you tell us what is that album that you are making the case for today?
Yes, so today I have brought forth OK Computer by a little group known as Radiohead.
Yes. Only one of my favorite albums of all time.
I mean, it was one of the ones when we were deciding what our first 2 episodes were going to be, when we each talked about an album, like OK Computer was tops on my list, but I figured we might talk about it again at some point, so I was like, you know what, we'll talk Sleater-Kinney instead, and when this came up, Tyler and I felt like, yep, the time is right to have a repeat artist for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought, what better way than with a band that, we feel pretty okay about,
Pretty OK Computer about. Yeah,
exactly. Yes.
And so this episode is going to be if you're looking on Spotify or YouTube, you might see a long timestamp on this episode. So just buckle up is what I say, because Brian and I go way back. So there will be plenty of reminiscing. Brian and I have known each other since middle school. And so I'm very, very excited to hear about how you've grown up with this album, because I know you've known it for a long time. But for those listeners who may not know the album or the band, the context around this, we have everyone's favorite segment today, which is, what is it, Michael?
It is the beginner's guide to Radiohead's OK Computer in 60 seconds.
And who's going to be doing the beginner's guide today?
I'm so glad you asked, Tyler, because we're mixing things up a little bit, and we decided that since the album is called OK Computer, that maybe we should let a computer generate our little 60-second intro here this time for the first time. Perhaps you've heard, dear listeners, of something called ChatGPT. So I have programmed ChatGPT to give us an intro that will last 60 seconds. Hopefully, we'll see how well they do. But I've also programmed ChatGPT to generate this intro in the style of a snooty rock critic.
Mm-hmm.
And it has well, Brian, you'll get to judge. Much like our previous guest, you get to evaluate ChatGPT's work. And
it all adds to your case, it's part of the scoring, so you will get to assess how it does. And you're a software guy anyway, so we trust your judgment on this.
All right.
Michael, is Mr. GPT ready?
Why, yes, Tyler, he is.
Okay. Mr. GPT has 1 minute on the clock.
Okay.
Starting in 3, 2, 1, go.
Radiohead, the British rock band formed in the prehistoric year of 1985, is known for their experimental approach to music, which some may call a desperate attempt at being edgy. Their third album, OK Computer, released in the dark ages of 1997, is hailed as a masterpiece, which isn't saying much in a world where people will listen to just about anything. The album even managed to win a Grammy Award for Best Alternative Music Album in 1998, which is kind of like being the tallest person in a room full of toddlers. Making the album was a difficult process for the band, who spent a painfully long time experimenting with different sounds and techniques, trying to be the cool kid on the block by incorporating elements of electronic and classical music into their songs. Despite their attempts at innovation, their music is often criticized as being dull and pretentious, which makes sense considering their fan base. Nonetheless, they continue to release critically acclaimed albums because apparently people will buy anything if it's hyped up enough. In conclusion, Radiohead is a band that tries too hard to be different, but in reality their music is nothing more than a self-indulgent snooze fest.
Whoa. There are 5 seconds left on the clock.
Whoa, all right.
Yeah.
I feel attacked.
I didn't tell ChatGPT to attack us, but it definitely felt like that was the case.
Jeez.
But Brian, don't let that affect your evaluation. If you had to give ChatGPT a score using whatever rubric you choose, how would you rate that?
Yeah, so I would give it 4 favors for favors, 3 still cries at a good film, and 4 kisses with saliva.
Oh man, Brian. I don't know if it deserves that. I don't know if it truly deserves that sort of scoring, but I'll let you have it. So it's 4 favors for favors, 3 still kisses with saliva, and what was it? 2 still cries at a good film.
3 still cries at a good film.
3 still cries at a good film.
Yeah. They add to 11, so
I love it.
I give it the 11. Yeah, it's a numbers day. Yeah,
say it for me one more time. 4 favors for favors.
3 cries at a good film,
Uh-huh.
and 4 kisses with saliva.
4 kisses with saliva. A reference, dear listener.
That's a fitter, happier rubric, I must say.
A fitter, happier rubric.
100%.
I was taken by the sort of it was pretty journalistic. There was a literary flair to that recap.
Yeah.
It took the brief. How do you think what do you think ChatGPT was thinking in that moment, Brian?
I think it like fixated on Snooty and was like, yeah. I'm gonna push that to the max for sure. But like my friends that don't like Radiohead, like they're just like listening and like, yes, like I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the issue. It's going on stereotype, which we don't like that.
Well, and as we've learned, ChatGPT is not really, if you're looking for facts, don't go to ChatGPT. So, all right, Brian, you know how we do things here. So before we talk about the album, we talk about the artist, we got to talk about you. What's your connection to music? What relationship does it have in your life?
Yeah, I think I'm a pretty amateur, hobbyist listener. Like you guys said, anyone who has a song in their heart is welcome here. I mean, that's really me. Like I don't do anything actively creative with music or anything, but I just have a real love for it. Like I do love playing music trivia and knowing things very deeply about music. Growing up, my mom always had a Beach Boys CD in my car, and my dad always had a Hank Williams Sr. CD, and the rest of the music universe was country music radio in St. Louis.
Oh yeah, was it KLOU? Was that one?
WIL and the
WIL.
Bull.
Oh, and the Bull. Oh
yeah. Yeah.
600 points for referencing the Bull.
And so I remember very vividly, I had got this CD player and I, asked my parents, like, do we have any CDs? And my dad was like, I think I have some Beatles CDs in the, den. And I went to look and found Help and Sgt. Pepper was the main one. And I just remember like being in bed listening to Sgt. Pepper and being like, what is this? And what else is out there that I don't know about? And like since then I've been like trying to figure out what else is out there. And so I've been doing this project recently where I've been going through Rolling Stone's top 500 albums from 500 to 1.
How far in are you?
So I'm on the last 100.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll put a link, but I'm going to like write about my experience with the last 100 albums on a Substack blog.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Any bands that, I mean, we're talking about, we'll get into Radiohead, but like any bands from this journey that have particularly stuck with you of the 400 you've already listened to?
Yeah, I think I'm more of a Led Zeppelin fan after going through this, all their different phases.
9,000 points for getting the let out.
Yeah. And then a Nina Simone album like really struck me.
Which one?
It's the Wind one. And then I just don't think I'll ever like Bob Dylan.
Really?
Like, I recognize he's great. I just don't know if I'll ever like really fall in love with his albums.
I'm right there with you, Brian. I'm not a huge Bob Dylan fan.
Well, see, it took a while for me, but it clicked eventually. Like I was on one car trip one time driving to see my grandparents, and I had a coworker who was really into Dylan, and he had suggested a particular, entry point, and it clicked. And I'm pro Dylan now. I think I get it. No judgment. I think he is, his voice can be grating. I will say that. And he's a bit of a weirdo. I will say about Nina Simone, that's one of Tom York's favorite artists as well. He was on a podcast radio program called Desert Island Discs. Have you listened to that one, Brian?
No.
You would really like that one. It's a long-running BBC radio program where they bring people on, not dissimilar from what we do here, but where they talk about their desert island albums that they would bring along, and he included a Nina Simone one on there. So you're in good company.
Wow, that's real good company. Yeah. I'll take it.
But you're a drummer too. I mean, it can't go understated how. That was like, I think where we first met was in band in middle school and up through high school. You played in the jazz band. So do you play anymore? Like, is that something you do with any regularity?
I fiddle around a little bit, but not like in a group or anything like that. I I've also been trying to pick up guitar like hobbyistly, but it's incredibly difficult. But yeah, drumming is my thing. Like in drumming, we'll probably talk about it later, but is a big metric for me. Like I have to have good beat and rhythm.
I feel you on the guitar thing. I took piano for 13 years and I really wanted to learn how to play guitar. And my piano teacher was like, no, do not do that because you will ruin your fingers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The technical piece is so challenging with it.
Even though Radiohead has a song called Anyone Can Play Guitar, I don't necessarily think that everyone will play guitar.
It's not true.
Yeah, it doesn't say play well.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, what about OK Computer then? So do you remember the moment you discovered it?
Yeah, I was in high school and having a debate with one of our friend group, Steve, about that I had heard the song Karma Police, but it was covered. It was a reggae cover of it. And I was like, oh, this is a cool reggae song. It was by UB40. And he was like, that's a Radiohead song, dude. And I was like, really? So that was like the first intro to it. And he's like, I think you like it. And I knew you all loved Radiohead, so I really wanted to like the album. But I just had no angst in high school. So I listened to it and I was like, I don't get it. Yeah, like
you didn't have angst? That's a fair assessment to say that you're, like maybe that was something that prevented you from fully getting it at the time.
Well, the dam broke in college and it just all came crashing, and then I hugged it like an old blanket, like this album. Like
totally. It's an old blanket. Yeah, 10,000 points for that. It is like an old blanket at this point.
That is the thing about this album. I listened to this other podcast, 60 Songs to Explain the 90s with Rob Harvilla, and he and I both share a love for this album, a love so deep that it's sort of like I was re-listening to the album for this episode. And it's just so part of my being now that I can have it on in the background, which seems like a strange album to have on in the background. But like, I just know every fiber of this album so well that it just feels like home to me, even when it's at its most alienating or, loud or angry or pensive. Like it's part of me. Do you feel like, does it occupy that same space for you?
Very much so, because I've moved cities a couple times in my adult life, and each time you move a city, like you have to rebuild all your social connections and everything. And so I think some of the topics in here around like isolation or alienation, like, they're so comforting when you're in those times. You like some of the lyrics I'll just think about for days because they're just poetry. Like there's so much in a line.
The interesting thing about what I've, read, and I'm sure you've read some similar stuff, Brian, about how they kind of wanted to go away from introspection with this album. And they wanted to, that for them, The Bends was an introspective album. It was like a self-exploration album. And so moving away from that, consciously trying to move away from that, it's like they almost inadvertently made an album that helped a whole generation of people introspect on a very deep level.
I do think that there's so much external. Like the other night, I just watched the Meeting People is Easy doc to prepare for this. And they describe this album as like the feeling of like impotence in the world. Yeah. So I think that's that like external focus, but it loops back around to the internal because it's you feeling in the world and your feelings in the world.
Yeah, and a lot of people have said too, like people sometimes credit this album as being about technology and what technology is going to do for the world. Because again, this was in 1997, and a lot of the things that they've were afraid of on this album have since become part of our everyday lives. But I think it's not so much about the technology as it is about the alienation that technology may create, which, in 97, it wasn't quite there yet, but they saw the writing on the wall.
I do think it's interesting that Tom in that doc also says like, this isn't a concept album, but what you said, Tyler, I can't think of what else is a concept album if not this.
Maybe he was saying in that it doesn't break form or something like that, or it doesn't challenge a sort of traditional album form as it, as we understood it in the 90s.
I could see that. But I think as a software engineer, like the technology piece is so interesting to me. And
It is.
it's one of the things I really love about it, that it's like, to me, the title reads as like, I know I'm going to interact with technology in some way, but what is this deal I'm going to break with it? And like, how skeptical or accepting should I be?
Yeah. I like that. What's the deal that we're going to break with it? Because we didn't make a deal with technology, did we? Like it's a thing that we are all using, just like whenever it appears to us, really. Like even if we go back to like the Stone Ages, we just use the tools that we see in front of us that are being developed. It does feel like some agency over them is being taken away from us, which is scary.
Yeah, so I look at it as like a very like entering a negotiation, like, okay, computer, like what is the deal here type thing. That's how I read it. 6,000
points for that.
You said too it was a difficult listen for you at first, which I mean, I will admit it was for me. I mean, a lot of my favorite albums now are ones that were not easy, they were not comfortable, they were not recognizable at first. What was it about this album that seemed so foreign or unapproachable to you originally?
I think in the first couple listens, like I didn't get it's hard to understand Tom's lyrics all the time. So you don't totally know what the song's about, and the dissonance and kind of whine in certain places. I don't want to say that, but you know what I'm talking about, is like,
oh yeah,
it takes a bit, I think, to get used to.
Did you, when you first heard him sing? Well, first off, this was the first that I think what you were referring to is a reggae covers album called Radiohead, if I'm not mistaken. Michael, do you think I'm right?
I think that sounds very familiar. I don't think I've listened to it myself, but I know it exists.
It kind of rules. it's kind of great. But that was the first Radiohead song you had ever heard, period, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this was your entry point to the artist in general. Okay. And so did you think that he had a quote unquote good voice when you first listened to it? Did you think he was a good singer?
He can hit the notes and everything, like everything sounds right. So I think he's good from that point of view. I think it's kind of like the tone in some of these songs that at first I was like, I don't know why I would want to listen to something like this.
I get that. There's sort of a similar thing when it's like where there's an actor who's really quote unquote interesting looking, and you're like, oh, he's very charismatic, but he's not beautiful or something like that. His voice, I agree, sometimes feels there's a whine to it that puts up a barrier to entry. It puts up a barrier to like connecting with it sometimes, but to me, it seems like it makes it worth it over time once you get familiar with it.
Yeah, totally. Like now when I hear it, it's like another instrument in the track almost. Like the words are almost secondary a lot of times.
And there's already a lot of complexity to the music that they're making. I mean, if you know anything about music theory, if you try to, I mean, Tyler and I were trying to determine the key. One of the previous albums this season, we were trying to figure out how many different keys an album was in, and like the number of I mean, you almost can't. The way that they write music, it sort of defies all music theory. And I think the reason that people study music theory is because we've learned over time that certain chord progressions, certain ways of structuring music are just more pleasing to our ear in some way. And Radiohead sort of, for the most part, takes all that and says, nah, we're going to do whatever we want.
When I was like looking at some of their sheet music, just for guitar, like if I really focus, can I try to learn something? And it's like I can't even read it. Like, in comparison to other guitar music.
There's certain drum beats too in their body of work that I have heard people who I know who drum argue over what is actually happening in those sequences for years. And these are like trained musicians. The first drum beat in Morning Bell on Kid A, I've heard like 3 or 4 different drummers argue about what is actually being played there. And I love that there's some mystery about that. I love that there's a little bit of mystery about how and why it happens.
Me too, because like it doesn't totally matter. And we'll get to this in the standout track, but it's like you try to like quantify and analyze all this stuff, but like, I don't know, you just love it. And there's something that is nice about that mystery. And it's like, write it however you want, but this is how it's supposed to sound.
Well, that feels like a fantastic segue. Let's talk about what you've chosen as your standout track for the album.
Yeah, so I've picked Airbag after much last minute deliberation over what to choose. And you guys had said in an earlier episode that like a great album, if it has good pieces of bread on both sides, it's going to be a great album. And this is one of the best top pieces of bread, I think, that there is to kick the album off in.
Oh, see, that's interesting. That means you build your sandwich from the top down, though, not from the bottom up.
No,
okay, all right. Bottom.
No, but when you're sequencing the album, like you have all the pieces. So what Brian all Brian is saying is that the top piece of bread, when they selected it to be the top, like
it's the first one you come to. I see.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we listen to it and then we'll talk a bit more about it on the other side. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. Hey everyone, here's Airbag by Radiohead.